I'm going to refer to this as the shit food solution. When it comes to emotional eating, there is a really broad spectrum of behaviour here. We could talk about at one end being mindless eating and just not being aware of what we're doing, or even just ignorant to nutritional science. To the other end of the spectrum, which would be a conscious degradation or attack at your health and well-being, which would be the loose definition for an eating disorder. Now, I'll preface this by saying there are two elements to emotional eating. One is physiological, the neurochemicals that are released or affected by certain food choices and the hormonal responses to that. That's a whole separate bit of content and information entirely. But from a psychological point of view, there is a psychological cycle of emotional eating that we can look at and first of all start a process of awareness and starting to define what the cycle is and being aware of the certain points in that cycle. And two is a solution. So when we talk about emotional eating, what are the emotional states that we find ourselves in when we emotionally eat? Well, there's usually a situation that occurs. It could be an argument with your boss. It could just be some kind of a tragedy. It could be, a relationship issue. Your husband isn't getting along with your boyfriend, whatever it is. But there's some kind of negative situation or circumstance triggers a negative emotional state, which leads to a shitty food choice. Now, usually if we're going to be emotionally eating, we're eating stuff like chocolate, chips, wine, cheese, lollies, pastries, whatever it is. Almost everyone I know who is emotionally eaten, which is everyone I know, if you have emotions and you eat, you're probably emotionally eaten, whether that's acute once or it's a chronic behaviour, reaches for pumpkin and steamed chicken when they're feeling these bad choices. So we've all seen this play out, usually through our own set of circumstances. That leads me to the emotional eating cycle. The situation, the circumstance is a trigger. The emotional state is what we feel, and this is our response. It's our emotional response to the circumstance. Now that leads to some kind of action. Often if we're feeling powerless to the situation we find ourselves in, it gets really easy to take action, even if it's negative action. If you're feeling like there's a work issue that you're completely out of control in, it gets, swing your arms, you're going to hit a 7-Eleven, grab a candy bar, solution. That leads to our false bliss. We're taking action, it's negative action, we're taking action, and we're going to feel great for the 15 seconds that it takes to consume that chocolate bar. But of course, 15 minutes later, how do we feel? We will feel guilty, weak, shame, regret, and failure. So this is the hamster wheel. The first part of the solution is just awareness. If you know that this hamster wheel exists and you can pinpoint it, then maybe you can actually intervene. So if you're standing at the checkout line, you've got 15 chocolate bars, 2 litres of Haagen-Dazs and a bag of Doritos, and you're thinking, why am I buying all this shit? Oh, it's because, husband left me, or this happened. Okay, I know that I'm feeling horrible. I deserve to feel horrible. But if I eat these horrible foods, all I'm going to do is to amplify this process. So think about this as being a cup. This is your threshold, right? So call this 100, call this 0, and this is your threshold. You get below that threshold, then you're going to repeat the cycle. Well, all these actions are just diluting this sense of confidence and self-esteem, and you're actually just bringing that threshold lower and lower. Now, the second part of the solution, and I know this sounds super simplified, but it works. It works 100% of the time for those people who follow it 100% of the time. The people who will only disagree with this, people who have never done it for long enough or proactively enough. And I know it's simple, but if you could be aware of this cycle and intervene and think, whilst you're standing there at the checkout and you've got those 15 candy bars there, and go, I can either eat all this shit, which is going to make me feel good for 10 seconds and then feel shit for the next week, or I can do something. I can go for a run, go for a swim, lift some weights, do some meditation, do some yoga, whatever it is, but I'm not going to participate in the bad food choices which is going to simply amplify that. You actually create the opposite effect. Every time you stop that and do whatever it is, drop and do 10 burpees, you start to build your sense of confidence, start to build your sense of resilience and fortitude. Now what happens is, rather than being a victim on this hamster wheel of emotional eating, because your threshold for pain is so low, you start to build real bliss. I feel awesome. You don't feel this hangover, you feel this sense of confidence creation. Now actually the foods that you want are the foods that nourish your body. So we take emotional eating away from this constant context. The very topic of this video is emotional eating. Now, what if emotional eating doesn't have to always be negative? I emotionally eat great foods because I feel awesome. So that's kind of the process that from the second stage is if we can inverse this and start to look at food in a positive way that's nourishing our body through positive action, then emotional eating can become a thing of the past. I know it's simplified, but that's a two-step solution, guys. One is awareness, being conscious of this process, this hamster wheel, which all of us find ourselves on at some point in time. Checking ourselves at some point, hey, I'm about to do that thing that makes me feel horrible. It's a thing that I always do, and I always feel horrible. What if I change that dramatically, like a massive, massive pattern interrupt, and just went for a run or did something completely different and started to feel awesome, started to fill my cup? Then actually, these triggers don't exist anymore, and my emotional eating is emotionally eating awesome foods because I feel awesome. There you go, hope that helps.